2021. Open the meeting at 3:12 p.m. Apologies for the delay in starting. For those who are tuning in, we've had a number of meetings this afternoon and we've been rolling from one to the next. I don't think we have any leave of absence. We've had the recognition of traditional owners this morning. Thank you, Councillor Duff. No declarations of interest, councillors. If not, we'll move on. Confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting at page 5. Do we have a mover for such? Thanks, Councillor Froelich. Second, thanks, Councillor Potter. Any questions or concerns? If not, those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. I'll move on now to the next item, which is the Waste Services Operational Budget for 21-22. We'll do is we got our accounting staff there, our manager of finance. Thank you very much for being here. That's great, Selena and Craig, Manager Craig and GMO May. So let's get started with that. We've got a handout in front of us, Council. So might hand over to you guys to do a team effort here. Manager Patch and Selena, if you could run us through that, that'd be great. Thank you. So we start with scenario 11, is it? Scenario 11? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we're up to scenario 11. That's what we workshopped on Monday. So basically this has got CapEx in it for moving forward for waste services, and also this does not include the 100K for the dividend. Is that correct, Selena? Yes, so it has no dividend. It results in an increase of 6.55% on the domestic collection rate. Commercial rate is held at $188 a year. Bunya Mountains increase to account for the increased cost there, and a 1.1% increase on the waste management levy. That allows council to pay its principal and also run the program at a modest surplus in the 21-22 financial year.
So in summary, on the rating strategy on this scenario, the collection service goes from 168 to 188.
To 179.
To 179, sorry. Yes, I see that there. So 168 to 179 under this scenario at least. And the levy, Craig, goes from...
Has a 162.50 to 164.50, a $2 increase.
Okay. 162.50 to 164.50. Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to ask why the dividend had actually been removed from this model.
It was removed at the request of the Mayor when we had that workshop a couple of weeks ago.
So during the workshop, I requested that remove that so we could see what we would have to, what our rating strategy would have to be without a dividend. But that is certainly open for re-inclusion if the committee or council has appetite for including the dividend. We'd have to remodel that then, I guess, Selena, wouldn't we, to see what the impact on a 10-year cash flow would be?
That'd be correct.
But yeah, certainly opportunity to bring that back if council wants to consider that. Yeah.
Oh, well, certainly in the first instance, I was actually not for the dividend, but in thinking about it and all the work that we've done and recognising the value of the assets and a return on those assets as the other business units such as water and waste contribute to council, I'm probably rethinking that, like to bring all business units in line with the practice of returning a dividend to our general operations is my thinking. And even if that is only a modest dividend, it's a return on the investment that the people of the region have made in the assets, in the waste management assets. So I am mindful that all business units still need to have some funds available to maintain their sustainability and deliver on their capex programs, but certainly open to any insights any of the general managers might have about that. But that was my thinking from all the work that we'd done. So
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I think we'd had a discussion with Manager Tim about the value of our water assets, and because there's such a big value on the water assets, Tim, to even deliver a 0.002 dividend, it was millions of dollars in dividends, I think, from memory. Yeah, so a 2.7% on waste, if we did a 2.7% on water to be consistent for all the different business units for fairness, what is it, Tim, about 8.5 million was the dividend. So then we said, well, do we consistently not have a dividend, or do we have a dividend but only apply it to some business units, not others? Do we have different percentages? You know, what's council's approach going to be on that? So it's open for discussion for sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, look, I personally believe that if we're going to charge a dividend on one unit, it should be right across the board. We either do or we don't to the different. I just don't think it's fair for the different sections of council, to be quite honest.
Good conversation. What do other councillors think? I mean, if we're going to charge a dividend for water, it would have to be a very, very small percentage, because as I said, the value of the asset's just so massive. Our investment there is huge. But keen to hear what other councillors think on that. Ros Water, what are your thoughts there?
With the water dividend, is that, through you, Mayor, Selena, is that 200,000 a year dividend for water?
Yeah, we had 200,000. Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. We had 200,000 in the water business unit for the dividend, and 255 for sewage.
Okay, and 100, we did look
We
at
did have
100 for waste?
100 in scenario 9. There was 100,000 in there for waste.
Yeah.
We haven't revisited fleet yet.
Okay, so over the 10 years, so the water dividend over the 10 years would be $2 million for water, 2.55 for wastewater, and 1 million for waste that will be going back into the general ops thing over those 10 years. Wouldn't it be better off putting that money back into their areas so we've got more money at the end of the 10 years to do capital works instead of putting it in general ops?
You wouldn't, through Ms. Mayor, you wouldn't take it out of, it comes out of those business units as a return on investment and then goes over to the general ops because as part of SBRC return on having those business units. If you decided that you didn't want to do a dividend, you just wouldn't charge it. You wouldn't, because otherwise you'd be taking it out of the business unit and giving it back to them. So you'd either not charge it, and if you do, then you would charge the business unit, and then it would come back to Gen Ops. So you can't you can't give it back to that area.
No, but I think what Councillor Froloh's saying, Sina, is that if we don't charge a dividend, then they can keep that money in their business unit capital budget for future replacements, upgrades and renewals. So it's a bit, if you're a company, some companies will choose not to pay a dividend to their shareholders. They'll choose to reinvest that back in their infrastructure, in their assets. Other companies will pay a dividend and not invest in their assets. So for council, we've got to decide which way we want to go.
I agree. So, sorry, you go.
Mr. Mayor, it's an alternative thought and to help progress today. And at the risk, again, as I always say with some of these, of getting rocks, Manager Patch produced a very good presentation at the beginning of this whole process about the number of transfer stations and everything we have. Rather than we had dividend, no dividend, we have got a lot of assets, and we've had the conversation also about fencing, not fencing. And some of our biggest trouble is with boundary stations that are not asset. We're doing a review this next year. Is it worth moving forward? But again, we can put into the operational plan that we do community consultation. We do have a really good look at all those assets, as all those transfer stations. That could be equivalent to your dividend rather than now. And I also understand council isn't necessarily wanting to reduce services, but that early presentation without digging it out from Manager Patch and the team today about the travel distance, and you yourself have talked about the travel distance, is that an area that we really should have a really good hard look at while we're doing that review over this next 12 months? The number of these facilities we have, the service delivery, agreed service delivery that council's looking at, and then have a position for next year's budget. So it's not saying close them today or close them next week. We would seriously have to talk to the community, but it's an alternative view of how you could get a return back to the organisation.
I think, Mr. CEO, we are going to have to develop what you've called a path to surplus. And as part of that path to surplus, we can't leave any stone unturned, and we will have to consider those sorts of issues over the next 12 months to looking at our transfer stations. If we fall short on getting ourselves out of deficit, then I think those issues then have to come onto the table for consideration at some point in time. Once we've once we've dealt with all the overheads and we've got the organisation operating as efficiently as it possibly can, then absolutely we're going to have to look at some of those services if we are still at that point aren't out of deficit. Councillor Duff.
So I came to the table and fought hard, and I have fought very hard to keep all those rural transfer stations. We're just making a decision to do the Maidenwell transfer station, which I fully support. But I just think if we're going to declare that we're going to do Maidenwell was one of the ones we were considering as that Manager Craig had on his list to absolutely not. It was one that we would look at to close. Why then would we just progress and do this? Like, I thought we had a general philosophy that we were not going to go down that path of reducing services to ratepayers. And the Mayor articulated that this morning. And I know that you're saying not leave a stone unturned, but we are just in the process of actually spending a significant amount of money on Maidenwell, which was one of the ones that was on the list to not do. So we're either, if we're going to go down that path, then we don't do Maidenwell. But if we are, in my opinion, if we are going to do Maidenwell, then that's off the table then. That's just my opinion.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Duff. It's a good debate. We can continue that later. Just want to pick up on Councillor Shoemaker's made a point here about a dividend. Should we be paying a dividend? Councillor Fryloff suggesting that perhaps we should be reinvesting or leaving that in the kitty so that the business units can have the money available to renew and replace their assets. What are other councillors thinking? In terms of letting Selina know, do we want to put dividends into these models or not? So 100,000 here for waste. Do we want to include that? Other councillors? What's your thought? Councillor Jones?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I agree with Councillor Fryloff because I think if we're operating them as separate business units and not all ratepayers will be paying this sort of fee, am I correct in that? And these are wheelie bins, is that so? The rural people and those sort of things, they wouldn't be paying these rates would be incurred by the real or certain amount. Not all ratepayers would be paying this. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, so Councillor Jones, just bring up to date, because I know you've had to be away with family commitments, but yeah, so with waste, the wheelie bin goes up from $168 to $179, so an extra $11. So yeah, that's only the town residents. So the only impact on the rural residents, as you're saying, the farmers and so forth, would be that small increase of $2 on the waste levy. So it goes up from $162 to $164. So that's the only impact. So you're pretty well spot on. Yeah, very little impact on the rural residents.
So basically, and just listening to what Councillor Fryloff referred to and made comment around the water, wastewater and all that sort of stuff. So my personal view is if we're running them as individual business units, I'd like to see that money that's raised over and above anything that we need to spend through the year to be kept in that particular thing, to be spent on the infrastructure in that particular, if it's water, wastewater or whatever, because the people that are paying it then get a return on the investment that they're actually making the investment on, rather than having it put back into Gen Ops and then having the money spent elsewhere across the organisation.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Councillor Shoemaker?
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of that. I just raise it because certainly I'm similar to Councillor Potter. I don't believe water and wastewater should actually pay a dividend if waste doesn't. I think we do need to have a generic kind of model and approach to how we use our business units. We had discussed in some of the workshops what does a return on the cash and the capital that the people of the South Burnett invest in those assets look like for council? And if that means that all of the funds that are collected for each service is reinvested into the service, I'm fully supportive of that with the challenges that we've got ahead of us, particularly from a water perspective. But I think it does need to be a generic approach across our budget. We cannot be cross-subsidising our general operations with dividends from other areas. I think that has to be a sole way forward. I don't think there's any. We do it for one business department and we don't do it for the next.
Thanks, Councillor Schumacher. So I guess what I'm hearing around the room, so you've still got your light on, by the way.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing around the room is that we want consistency. If we're going to do it for one business, we do it for all, or we don't do it at all. And that I'm hearing that the appetite of this committee is to, at least at this stage, not pay dividends, but allow the business units to hold that money as part of their CapEx budget for their future renewals and upgrades. Can I just say, is there any councillor that particularly in this committee has objection to that? Okay, because it's a yes or no question, councillor. Yes or no? Do you have objection to that? Only put your light on if you object to it.
Yes.
You object to doing that. Okay.
I don't object to this particular situation here. I'm just talking about having a general view that that's what we do, because we've got we're talking about the Badooma Dam and different ones that we're going to be making business units. And if we have that philosophy.
No, Councillor Duff, can I interject? Just take your light off if you could, please. What I'm suggesting is that for this budget, we've got to move forward and get this budget sorted. Now, for this budget, we say no dividends across the board for wastewater and water, okay, at this point in time. We are going to embark on a process over the next 2 years of developing a strategy, a pathway out of deficit, a pathway to surplus. I would suggest that as part of the development of that strategy, that's a 2-year body of work we've got to do as an organisation. We can give consideration to payment of future dividends, and maybe we develop a dividend policy that's consistent across the organisation. But at this point in time, what I'm hearing is no dividend to any business unit right now. If no one objects to that, I think we should give that guidance to Selena so she can model on that basis. Everyone comfortable? Ros, that's really what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, if everyone's in agreement, would we be able to have that as a recommendation back to council? The committee recommends.
Mr. CEO, that'd be great. Okay, so there's here is a recommendation that there is a recommendation to council that for the 2020/21 budget, uh, 21/22, sorry, Liel, that for the 21/22 budget, council adopts a 1-year policy, or a 1-year strategy of 0 dividends. The word 0, sorry, Liddell. Councillor Froloff, are you happy to move that? Thank you. We have a seconder. Councillor Jones. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. That's a good discussion. Thanks, Mr. CEO. So for this 1 year, 0 dividends across the organisation. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so rating strategy, we've got 6.5%, 168 to 179 on wheelie bins, and we've got the CPI of 1.1%, which takes the levy from 162.50 to 164.50. Just while we're sort of trying to bed down the rating strategy, any debate or concerns on that from councillors in the committee? Any further discussion on that before we move on to the expenses side? Okay, so Selena, that being the case, if we hold the expenses they are, what does our 10-year forecasted cash flow then look like with that rating strategy?
Can you just scroll the other way? Sorry. Next. There. So your cash positive for the 10 years. Year 1, you're not covering your principal payment, but the remaining years you are. Yeah, it's doable.
So we're covering our 10-year capex based on what we know around the MIP at this point in time?
That's correct, and that's including the movement of the 850 that was in year one has now been split between 2 years.
Now, just for council, I think Councillor Jones has missed some of these conversations. Obviously, this will be something close to Councillor Jones's heart in representing his division. The Maidenwell transfer station was originally 350,000, and we had a conversation in a workshop about bringing that back to 230,000. Manager Patch, and that is exactly the same as what was originally proposed, but just taking out the security cameras and not having the card swipe system. But can you explain to us, because we need to have a conversation and debate around this now that Councillor Jones is back, to make sure we get this right, and the council's happy with that. What are we proposing to get for the 230,000? What does the Maidenwell community get for that?
Yep. So in relation to, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. In relation to the discussions that were had on Monday, Councillor Jones, in your absence, there was the question was asked, how can we minimise the costs in the CapEx program for waste services? And one of those items was the Maidenwell transfer station upgrade. So there was discussion around a number of options. You could just not do anything, leave it as currently is, which I think one of the primary drivers for not having it where it is was about visual amenity coming into town. So moving apart from that option, as in status quo, do nothing, the secondary option is you could just move those bulk bins from the current location, providing that the landowner who we were negotiating with was willing to sell the land for a different arrangement, because what we were discussing with him previously was an arrangement similar to what was at Cumbia. So if they were still happy to sell us the land, then we could just move the bulk bins from the road reserve area to the new area and screen that off, but not do anything too much to it. You would still have the same operational costs from JJ's to pick up those bulk bins, but the arrangement would largely be the same. The third option you could do is you could move to skip bins, such as the 27, which we were proposing to do so. You still do all the earthworks, you still do all the fencing, you still do the all-weather road access into that site. If you don't do the gate system, the camera system, don't run the electricity down to the site to run those, then the 230,000 is what it would cost. What you would get is the proposal that you were going to put in minus all the electronics, which is the gate and the camera. So it would be open 24/7 effectively for anyone to go into, and you'll still be able to utilise the facility without that security feature, more or less.
So, Craig, at the moment we've just got the two big bulk bins, but you said we'd then go to 227 cubic metre skip bins, so we'd get 54 cubic metres at Maidenwell?
So at the moment there is 8 2 cubic metre bulk bins and 2 3 cubic metre bulk bins. So a total of 16 and 6 is... Hang on, 8 twos is 16 and 6 is 22 cubic metres. So you would, if you go to the 227s, you will end up with 54 cubes, which is more capacity than what you presently have in those bulk bins.
So the matter for council is now, and I guess this is where we can have a proper conversation now with Councillor Jones here. What is the community expecting? What's going to suit Maidenwell best? I'm really keen to hear from Councillor Jones about the need for the gate with the swipe card and the cameras, because, yeah, we've got to get this right. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Councillor Jones?
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I can assure you that the community of Maidenwell and the surrounds are well aware of the conversations that went on in the last week or so. They've witnessed, and I've had phone calls to enlighten me that they've listened to the conversations on whatever they were listening to. But look, the conversations at the moment around Maidenwell is, again, it was a commitment and all this sort of stuff, and they understand. I've had conversations with people and all that sort of stuff in regards to it's been such a drawn-out process, it should have been completed. But we've had all sorts of restrictions, and I'm not blaming the staff. They've done a wonderful job because it's the state government's been the hold up in the whole process. We tried to get it down the road initially to another position, and then we had to wait for them, and then we had to come back. And so I actually commend the staff for the work that they put into it, and just unfortunately it's dragged on. You drive into Maidenwell, we've got a beautiful new village sign, welcome to Maidenwell, with an absolute disgraceful bloody rubbish tip right behind the sign. Yes, it is visual amenities, it's absolute disgrace. The unfortunate thing is it's a very convenient stop along the road for a lot of workers that come into our region from outside the Shire. If we don't gate it, at least, or what, I don't know how we do it. I understand the cost saving and that, you know, and I said I'm not against it, but this is an issue that's was committed and was supposedly to be implemented, and I listened to Councillor Duff's comments over there, which I'll take on notice. But yeah, I believe it's going to be an ongoing issue. I guess the question is the amount of extra space, like that quantity of rubbish that you speak of. That's emptied twice a week, isn't it? Correct. So we're talking up around the 50 cubic metres of rubbish. And if we're being honest, those 50 cubic metres, the bins are overflowing and there's rubbish all around the ground. I would suggest nearly every week that some of the people, the staff of JJ Richards, have to get out and pick up. I think we send staff out there on a regular occasion to pick up and clean up that site. So it's not just a matter of 22 or 28 cubic metres. It's emptied twice a week, and by the time it comes back around, the rubbish is overflowing. The place looks absolutely disgusting, and yes, we can screen it, but if we don't do something to control the people that use it, the issue is not going to go away.
So, Councillor Jones, the only concern that I had was, and I had this conversation with a Maidenwell resident this morning, if we gate it off and put up swipe cards, so you've got to be a local resident to get a card, well, is there a chance that people will then start dropping their rubbish at the front gate and then still create that visual amenity problem? So would we be better just to let them go in and put it in the skip bins? At least then we can pick it up and get rid of it. I don't know what.
Yeah. Well, look,
what's the reality there with that?
I honestly believe that where we're heading with the rubbish and the new levy and all that sort of stuff, you know, I'll just to back this up, I can see trouble happening in Blackbutt as well, because the commercial waste and all that sort of stuff down there, they're being told that they've got to take it through to Lenango now. I can assure you that it won't make its way through to Lenango. So the problems are already starting. So it's going to be a problem right across Queensland in particular, and if Australia's got to deal with the same thing that this council has to with the state levy being imposed upon us and all those sort of extra burdens. Good question, Mr Mayor. I can't answer that either way, whether you can, yes, you possibly are, and no, you're probably not. If we've got the security cameras and all that there and we can start prosecuting people, I think that's where we need to go. I honestly do. If we've got it gated and we've got the cameras up there and we catch somebody, just say, I don't know, Joe Blow goes down there and dumps his rubbish at the front gate and he's on camera or whatever, I think that's where we need to prosecute. And I honestly believe that that's where we're going to be led to across our whole region. It's not just going to be in Maidenwell, it's not just going to be in Blackbutt, but once we start imposing things and saying, oh, well, you've got to take that commercial waste across to Nanango, I can assure you now that there's rubbish being dumped in the forestries across Banarkin and Blackbutt as we speak.
So what you're really saying is that, you know, Maidenwell could be a model with the security cameras and the swipe cards, that we might have to actually spend more on our transfer stations and put that model in place across the region as this illegal dumping problem continues.
Again, Mr Mayor, that I think we all sit in this chamber and we all know what the issues moving forward with any council is going to be. We've got to face the brunt, and as we all know, the state government's not doing a lot to help us in this regard. And again, they've just thrown it out and said, okay, local government, look after it. This is what we want you to do. You've got to create that fix. But again, that's where yeah, look, and I go back, it's money committed and all that sort of stuff. We made the commitment, we went through community consultation, we've done everything else, and yeah, we've had a lot of hold-ups along the way. But again, I just think we've been pushed into a position, and yes, Maidenwell could be a prime example to be an example for the whole region, that if you're caught, dumping rubbish or what, I think we've just got to play hardball now, and you've got to enforce and prosecute people that are doing this. It's illegal. And Mr. Mayor, I say, use your comments before, like, let's get on the back of the ads and all that sort of stuff, dob in a bloody rubbish, whatever that ad was and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, so here we go. Here's an example where we have a major issue. And yes, it's in Maidenwell where I live, and I've got a wheelie bin. It doesn't affect me, but I know how many residents use that aren't on there and around the region. And and I know it's 300,000, 300 plus thousand, and I know we've got deficits, and I know we've got to do all this sort of stuff. And I've said openly, I'm happy to contribute and work with whatever we can do to save money and all the rest of it. And I'm also a big believer that we've got a deficit, and if we can just minimise and continue to lower that deficit every year and not achieve it in 1 year, I think that's a good result. And I think the council is working diligently then if we can show that we're working and our deficit comes down every year without affecting the services that we deliver to our community. And I go back, I've always said since I've been in council, I'm a core business person, and that's roads, rates, rubbish, water and wastewater. And here we are talking about water. I don't, that's, yeah. So no surprises. I would certainly move, and I would like to see that the full project be constructed and completed. And I know it doesn't suit with what the conversation we're having, but that's where I'm at.
No, it's certainly, it's not about whether it suits or not. I mean, what we need to know is what's going to work for the Maidenwell community. And if gating it and putting cameras up is what we need to start to do, and if that's what's going to work, then I'd be a supporter of that, because my thinking was more about just, yes, trying to save some CapEx money and leave it in the budget. We've got some encouraging news. I was pretty worried about the 550 next year on the weighbridge at Nanango, but we've got some good news coming through that we might be able to perhaps mitigate some of that through some other funding options now. Possibly, we'll see where that goes. I'm keen to hear what the other councillors think. I might just go Councillor Potter, and then we'll come back to Councillor Froloff and Henshin. What are your thoughts, Councillor Potter?
Look, I believe that it's quite important that we do the Maidenwell transfer station. I just have a question through you, Mr. Mayor, with regards to what other. Is Proston the only other one that we've gated and carded, or are there other transfer stations around that we've? And what are there illegal dumping issues outside those gates?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only waste facilities that are gated and have automatic cameras on them is Proston and Cumbia. Now, those two facilities do work very well. We don't actually have a lot of illegal dumping at those facilities, and it's probably because people are aware that they're on camera. We do have illegal dumping activities that unfortunately do occur at our more remote rural facilities that do not have any security and or supervision and or surveillance at them. That may change if you did secure those and have some surveillance on them. And as Councillor Jones was referring to, if when you secure that facility up, and we have the electricity to the site and we put cameras in, one of the cameras would be at the gate, because historically, like when we closed up Wandai and Mergen, we did get indiscriminate dumping at the front gate for a few months, and that is either people who forgot that it was closed up or didn't realise what the times were that it was going to be open, and it was perhaps more of a protest activity to leave it there. But once that 3 months or so died down, we haven't seen that sort of indiscriminate dumping at the gate. But if somebody is going to do that and we can get the registration number of the vehicle or identify who the person is, then there really is only one thing for us to do, and that is to issue a fine and follow through with action, because
Patch, thank you. I might just cut you off there. I think you've answered the question very well. Thank you. Keen to hear from what Councillor Fryloff and Councillor Henson now, and I'm also keen to hear, as Councillor Potter's alluding to, we've got Proston and Cumbia now that are gated and carded and all that sort of thing. I'm keen to hear from you councillors that move in that area. Are people dumping rubbish on the side of the road now, or is that working really well? Because if that's working really well, I would be supportive of doing a similar model in Maidenwell. But keen to hear what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I've been called a few times by residents up in Maidenwell, since this is my portfolio, saying there's a heap of rubbish there. I've gone up there and I've seen lounge suites, mattresses and all that, and had to get on to Craig and the guys, the crew, to come up other than those 2 days that they normally pick up. So with that, which is putting more our resources. So I'm totally agreeable with Maidenwell. It's been long going. We've had many meetings up there at Maidenwell. When we first got in, we had the hall meeting where it was strongly put by the community up there that they wanted that refuse transfer station moved to somewhere that it wasn't an eyesore. And it is an eyesore when you do come through. I go that way coming home from Toowoomba and seeing some of the stuff like lounges and that, and now that Maidenwell's looking fantastic and done up, I am totally agreeable to have this done.
And Councillor Frog, would you agree with Councillor Jones that the community view is that gating it, carding it, putting the cameras up is the best way to manage it? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Henson, what are your
Thank you,
thoughts?
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, I'll speak for this because of experience with seeing the Cumbia rubbish dump years ago as to what it was to what it is today. A wonderful facility. Same with the Geelong transfer station out there. Same with the transfer station at the Chipinga, where I agreed to disagree with Councillor Duff. The rubbish and the habits of people with their rubbish. If you put a facility that is well managed and controlled, people's habits change with that. Since we've had the double skip bins put at Chipinga, we've had no illegal dumping out there. Since Cumbia gated, and that's quite some years ago now, and initially when it was first put in and the cost of it was a high on everybody's conversation list. Since it's been put in, I can personally tell you the control of rubbish in that Cumbia facility has improved tenfold. It honestly has. The same with the transfer stations when they've been extended or some refurbishment has been done with them, be it the Chipinga, be it the Geelong one. The control of the dumping and people's habits with dumping rubbish, if they're well maintained, well managed, saves people's habits with rubbish. And I really do commend those facilities, along with the public and how they use them. But if you've got a dump, it is just that. It is a dump. And there is rubbish everywhere. So I'd love to see the transfer stations throughout the Burnett. I'm not saying we need a gated one in every facility, but I mean in Division 6, there's an enormous amount of transfer stations. We've got Home Creek, we've got Geelong, we've got Chipinga, we've got Cumbia, and the list goes on. We've got Tingura and Woorolga, Memorandie, Wondoy. It's enormous, and our waste is incredible, and everybody's waste is occurring. Like, it's a throwaway society. We mentioned this last week. It is a throwaway society. So, look, if we can improve our waste facilities, and if that means gated facilities and carded and security, let's do it. Yep.
Well, thanks, Councillor Henson. You've convinced me. I'd like to move that we increase that 230 back to the 350 on the basis, Manager Patch, that it will include the 227 cubic metre skip bins, because clearly that's the capacity that's needed out there. Otherwise, as Councillor Jones said, we're just not going to have enough capacity. Does anyone prepared? Can I move that, Mr. CEO? Does anyone prepared to second that? Thanks, Councillor Henson. Okay, opportunity to talk for or against that, councillors. My resolution is that we increase that we provide the $350,000 as the capex budget for 21-22 for the Maidenwell transfer station. That $350,000 is provided in the 21-22 capex budget for the Maidenwell transfer station as originally planned? I just wanted to confirm with that 150,000 will get us the 227 cubic metre bins inside that budget. Is just a yes or no? Thank you. Okay, so I'm happy with that. We've got a second with Councillor Henson. Okay, over to councillors now. Thoughts, fors or against?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'm for that. I absolutely agree that to have the gates and then have it policed is the way forward, because Proston is magnificent. Like, they just keep that transfer station. It's just beautiful. And I agree with Councillor Henson. It's the way forward. We need, if we had them all gated and with the cameras, that would be perfect. I mean, obviously, where the commercial waste is, we can't do that because we've got to have them manned, because they've got to police the commercial as opposed to the non-commercial. But where we can, on those smaller ones, I absolutely love the idea of having them gated and with the cameras, because it's been a success story for both Cumbia and Proston.
Thanks, Councillor Duff.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm fully supportive. I see with this budget, and I'm really pleased that we've had these conversations, because through this process, we've actually arrived at a situation where we can support the $350,000, being able to potentially defer the investment on the Nanango Way Bridge for another year, and also the investment of another truck, which was only going to be at 70% utilisation, actually has enabled us the capability to make this decision, in my view. Before those discussions and this discussion, I was really thinking about how we can save some money, because we are really, I feel like we're between a rock and a hard place. And for me, the conversations that we've had, and I appreciate Councillor Jones, I'm sorry for any of the commentary you might have received from the community, but the reality is these are the conversations this council's going to have to continue to have, and I will be challenging every single project, not because I don't want to see an outcome for the community. My intention is to see the outcome but not hit the back pocket of our ratepayers. So I'm really pleased that through the conversations and the work that this council's been able to do, we've actually arrived at a position where I can see, even without the $100,000 dividend, and even with funding the full cost of the Maidenwell Waste Transfer Station, and I agree. I think in my notes here we've got 17 different facilities across the South Burnett, so we are going to have to look at ways to secure them into the future, and that might be a program across a number of years to do so. I think what we're modelling here, the $11 on your wheelie bin and the $2 on your waste levy, nobody wants to hit the back pockets of our ratepayers, but I think it's good that we can get this outcome with a minimal increase to waste services. So I'm fully supportive of funding the full amount for the Maidenwell Transfer Station, and I'm glad we've challenged that cost, because certainly the reduction in the need to purchase the truck and the weighbridge and the waste transfer station all in the same year has made a difference to what our rate increase needs to be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. Manager Patch, before we put this to the vote, just one question. The department have been frustratingly holding up the Maidenwell community on this for some time. Where is that at? Are they getting their backsides into gear and getting this sorted out so that we can get on and build this transfer station for the Maidenwell people? What's happening there?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. I believe last week I did give an update to council that the issue that was being held up was about the being able to clear the vegetation on the property. And it was early last week, that we got notification through that, yes, council can clear that vegetation if we acquired 1 hectare. So we've now commenced negotiations again with the landholder to see if they're still interested, and we sort of haven't confirmed exactly what the transfer station was going to look until council had finished this particular conversation. But now we will be saying we're moving ahead with the original proposal, and we can clear the vegetation. So you as the property owner, you're still happy to sell to us?
Okay, so if the property owners are prepared, all can move forward. If the budget is adopted on 30 June, this is included, which this is clearly appetite from council to have it included. We'll be in a position to get this done, finished, up and operating before, say, Christmas this year.
It would certainly be finished before the end of the 21-22 financial year. I don't believe I could commit to within 6 months that it would be up and operational. Ideally, that
No,
would be great, but
It's a fair answer. Thanks, Craig. Okay, councillors, it's there, $350,000. We maintain the commitment to the Maidenwell Transfer Station as originally planned. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thanks, everyone. That was an excellent debate.
Very good debate. Mr Mayor, just at the community meeting, we just resolved to do a future report back on Maidenwell Transfer for the history. Does this debate settle the need for that report? Because I just don't want to put if
Yes,
council
it
would
does.
still like it, but if we don't need to, we can save that time.
Yes, it does, Mr CEO.
Thank
No
you.
need to bring the report forward now. I think it's very clear what council's intentions are here. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now, so let's, can we go up and remodel that now? So we increased the 230 to the 350 in accordance with the committee's recommendation to council.
We can, Mr Mayor. It doesn't make
Can
a
you bring that up on
material-
the screen for us? Thank you.
I can't present.
Technology, bit of a technology problem here for those that are watching. Good old technology. Okay. Just whilst I was doing that, does councillors have? Oh, there we are. Excellent. There we go. Okay. So with that, with that now, with that intention of the committee, Selena, oh no, that stays at 550. Sorry.
Sorry, I've just been corrected. It's 500.
No, that stays at 550.
it's actually 500, Mr.
Oh, it
Mayor.
is 500.
Yes.
Sorry. Oh, good.
Just
Sorry.
made you $50,000 saving.
Oh, thank you, Manager. That's what we'd like to hear from all of our staff, and I look forward to General Manager O'May and General Manager Meehan sitting down the back there coming up and doing a similar thing. You've thrown out the challenge. Well done. Okay, and Aaron's on board. Okay, so that being the case, Selena, from an accountant's point of view, what you can see there with the 10-year cash flow, are we comfortable with that? Where
It doesn't make a material difference.
no material difference. Okay, good. Thank you. Right, can we go back to the statement of comprehensive statement of income then for councillors to have a look at the income, the profit and loss statement, as the community would know it as, the income and expenses. So with that rating model, and we talked about, we'd have total income of 6.106 million, total expenses of 6,087. So this year we'd have an operating surplus of $19,000. The principal repayment to the bank on the borrowings for the facilities is 73, so would have a deficit of 54, but then in year two, we start to really track into the black then, don't we? So we recover then. So just looking at that statement of income, councillors, any questions or concerns with that before we look to wrap this one up? Okay, if not, Mr. CEO, I would like to now put up a recommendation to council that the waste services budget, operational and capital budget. Oh, hang on, what's happened? Oh, you've done one. Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. So we'll go back to the Word document. Thanks, Lynelle. Okay, so committee recommends to council that the utility charge be set at $179. That's the wheelie bins. Commercial waste goes, well, hang on, what have we got here? Commercial waste goes to $250, does it? Did we agree to that? Is that something we discussed?
Yep.
Where did that
Through
come
you,
from?
Mr. Mayor. So that the commercial waste, because we pay the waste levy on the commercial bin. So the commercial charge is currently at 243. The 188 you're looking at is the exclusive of the waste levy. So for calculations purposes, that's why it's left out. So it's currently 243 because it's the 188 plus the waste levy. This is an increase on the waste levy of the $5.50, which is introduced by the state this year.
Okay, so the extra $7 covers the extra $5.50 that we've got to pay to the state government for that waste levy. Right, okay. Councillors comfortable with that? Questions on that element? Bunya Mountains Waste Management Utility Charge for collection of general waste up there is to be set at $248, which is the extra $48, I believe, that now simply allows us to cover our costs of collection. Council makes no profit on that. It's simply a direct cost that we're passing on. And the waste management separate charge for 2122 will be set at $164.50. So we've got residential wheelie bin 179. We've got commercial wheelie bin 250. We've got Bunya Mountains at 248, and the waste levy at $164.50, up from $162.50 for all rateable properties. Okay, so that's the recommendation to go up to council. Do we have a mover for that? Thanks, Councillor Potter. Seconder, thanks, Councillor Froloff. Anyone wish to speak? Final opportunity to speak for or against? Councillor Duff?
Just a question. What was the waste management utility charge for the collection of commercial waste? What was it?
$243. It's now $250.
243. That's different figures to what I had. So, okay.
243, but it's gone up to 250. The extra $7 to cover the extra $5.50 that the state government are now going to be charging us. So, council's basically just passing that across.
Yeah, that's fine. I just had a different figure of what it was. That's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Okay, well, right, Councillor Jones, you're good to go. Okay, we're going to put this to the vote. Those in favour? Okay, carried unanimously. Look forward to that going up into the draft budget for consideration by council. Okay, so that's that item dealt with. We'll now move on to 6.2, which is the water operational budget at page 12, and we'll call up General Manager Meehan and Manager Tim. Thanks, gentlemen, and thanks, Craig, for all your work. Manager Craig, yeah, thank you. What time? 4:30. Yeah, so we'll just give you an apologies to leave the meeting, hey? You happy with that? Yeah, but you just put your hand up and we'll just apology you out, yeah, and make a note in the minutes. Then the left, yeah, that's fine. Thanks very much, Selena. Okay, we'll now move on to item, we've just relocated ourselves. Councillor Duff, could you please return to your seat? Thank you. Item 6.2 at page 12. Okay, so we've got the water in front of us, and again, we'll get our manager, general manager, and our accounting finance manager to work us through this. Can we start, first of all, at the top, as we did previously, with the rating model 14, and then we've got 13, 14, and 15. Which one do you want to put up first, GM? 13, 14, or 15?
14.
14 on the front page. Yep. Okay.
I'll go with the lady, Mayor.
Go with the ladies. Best not to argue with the accountants. Okay.
Keep it in order.
With the finance manager. Okay. In order. Model 14, which is a $75 million wastewater capex spend. So that's waste and that's sewage and water combined. That's so we'll get you to talk us through that if we could. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this water model 14 is a recap from our last workshop. So the total water and wastewater capital spend was the $75 million. And of that, the 61.6 million was water. These rating assumptions were similar to your Model 12. All the out years are at your 6%, except for your high volume commercial at 1%. So this is where we were discussing the access at 4%, your consumption for residential to be 20%, your commercial at 10%, and the Proston Rural residential commercial at 20%, and high volume at 1%. This was the model before we started looking at the changes to the capital, which we'll go through in a minute. So in this particular scenario, the surplus or the net operating result in your income statement for year one is $143,000. It's not covering principal in that year one, but it is covering the principal in the following years. For your cash flow, you're increasing your restricted cash balance each year right up until your 25-26 year, and then you can see the negatives start to come in. So you're starting to spend more than you're receiving in those outer years, and you can see the effect of that in 30 and 31, where you're actually starting to run deficits. So in this model, there's a couple of graphs just to visualise, and you can see in the graph there where you start to run into deficits. So for your, I just did a quick calculation. If you were to do that, what the rate increase would be compounded over your 10 years, and you're looking at around 76% on the access, and about 80. For residential consumption, it was about 103,000, and your commercial was 86%. Yeah. Yep, over the 10-year period. So that's just a recap of where we had landed before we started discussing another capital program. So in the pieces of paper you've just got, there's 2 water and sewerage capital programs. One of them is for $75 million and the other is for the $64 million. So the one for the $75 million, the front pages are the whole program for water and sewerage combined. And then I've broken your water and your sewerage up. If you go down further through there, you'll see that it's actually been split between water and sewerage. And that's $75 million. Those projects add up to this model.
Then, so if we go to the second page, which at the bottom it says page 3, at the top then you've got model 15. So that's sewerage and water combined. And that's where we had conversations about perhaps pulling 10 million out, redoing those CapEx annual allocations on the basis of leaving trying to obviously seek some government funding around the Gordon Brook 7.5 there and some of the non-LGIP stuff we've pulled out. So am I on the right track there, Tim? Is that what we've done there with model 15?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. So we just reduced that out from year 25 onwards.
Thank you. Yeah. And so we've got 5% on access, 5% on consumption for residential and commercial, and 1% on the high volume commercial, which is those very high users of commercial water. Yeah. Okay. So the numbers on that, councillors, would be that we would then see they're up on the board there. The access at 5% would go from $624 to $655. That's a $31 increase per property for access. And the consumption would go from $1 on tier 1 at least, $1.57 to $1.65, which is an 8 cents per kilolitre increase. And obviously tiers 2 and tiers 3 sort of follow that trend. If one was to use 200 kilolitres on your property over the course of the period, then it would cost you an extra $16 per year, just to put that into some numbers for councillors. So we might just deal with that first in terms of how council's feeling about that rating strategy. Councillor Potter?
I'm just curious with regards to 14 and 15. I know we discussed some of these numbers the other day, but in model 15, some of these numbers have changes for consumption quite dramatically. the percentage rises. Residential and commercial, whereas before it's 20 and 10 on model 14, sorry.
Yeah, that's right. So we discussed if we pulled, rather than having to increase by 20% and 10%, we discussed, well, if we pulled 10 million out of our CapEx on the basis that we would push back into year 11 the 2.5 non-LGIP CapEx, and we would then seek to seek government support for the 7.5 million we'd need for off-site storage at Gordon Brook plus purchase of extra allocation. That'd pull 10 out of our CapEx and bring it back to 64. And then we modelled that and said, well, where would we need to rate to provide the cash for that? And that's where we fell at 5% and 5% rather than 20 and 10. Yeah.
So that's fine, but that means that Proston rural residential and commercial isn't even down there as being put up, or is it we decided that that was going to stay the same?
5%, I think. Would that be right, Tim?
That's not on there. That's not on this model 15 at all.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is they would be constant rate with the other. So residential would be the same as urban, and commercial would be the same, is my understanding.
Oh, so it's built into that one. Okay,
I just have to get Selena to check, but that was the intent of the model, Mayor.
So Proston Rural, for example, would go from $1.57 flat rate to $1.65 flat rate.
It's at the bottom
I
of
think.
page 4.
Sorry?
Of page 4.
Page 4.
Yep. There. The bottom 2 tiers there.
Yeah, the out years trend at 6%. So 5 this year, and they trend at 6% thereafter. With that rating strategy then, if council was comfortable with that rating strategy that we're looking at there now, model 15, Selena, how does that make our bottom line 10-year forecast look?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, this model does include your 200,000 dividend, so I would have to remove that out. I don't think that would materially change your rating strategy, because in year 1 you're only making a net operating result of $871. So if we took the 200,000 out for the dividend, then you'd be at the 200,000 surplus. Year 2, you can see for the first 2 years you're not covering your principal, so year 2 you would then be covering your principal. Look, for the couple of $1 million that you would do in it with what we have what we need to spend in CapEx for water, I would be saying that you'd keep your rating strategy the way it is, but we'd remove the dividend out and you'd have a greater surplus each year to put back into your capital spend.
Okay, yeah, well that's thank you for your advice. That's a matter for council now. If you want to pull that 200,000 out and remodel it, or if you're happy to see the model as it is. But as you said, not a material change on the 10-year cash flow, Selena. So what you're saying there, Selena, with that cash flow we can see in front of us, so is that we'll have a situation where we'll have a $64 million CapEx over the 10 years, and that will include borrowings of 11.8 million, which is the spillway work at Gordon Brook, which is split between those 3 financial years. That's it in summary, isn't it? Okay. And that's with 5% on access and 5% on consumption. Okay. Thank you. Where does that leave us in terms of our income statement then, in terms of deficits? Can we bring that up on the screen, Linnell? We got the income statement there. Next one up. Thank you. So we'd expect then at that rating strategy to get $11.09 million in income, 11.089 in expense. So we'd have a just break even basically before principal payments. So we'd fall short of 657,000 of principal payments in year 1, 201,000 in year 2, but then from year 3 on, we really start to run into the black, don't we, under that model? Okay. So looking at that model in front of you there, Council, how are you, Council's feeling about that? Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm supportive of Model 15 in terms of the rating assumptions, and certainly I do want to see that dividend removed and returned to council, to this business unit. However, I'm not going to support the reduction in the capital spend. I do believe we need to put our full capital program in there, and if we are lucky enough to get funding during that process, then that's a great thing. But for me personally, my preference is to have the full CapEx spend in there, $75 million. That's my view.
Thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. We had a fairly good conversation about this a few days back. And so what we'll see there in front of us, councillors, is all those bottom line figures you see there, the 657 on the red, the 201 on the red, they will all change because they're all factoring in a $200,000 dividend. So in year one, that'd come back to minus 457, and in year two, you'd pretty well break even. Year three would be plus 476. So you'd pretty well add, if you maintained that policy for 10 years, for example, you'd add $2 million into the pool, Aaron, I think, wouldn't you, for CapEx? So, assuming that council was to, in 12 months' time, develop a policy that said we would maintain zero dividends. Under that assumption, that would be the outcome. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. And through you, Mr. Mayor, the other thing is too, that allows you, if you do reintroduce a dividend in some strategy going forward, at least you've allowed for it as well. So you've got protection.
Yes, if I could just speak to the CapEx and reducing it by 10 million in terms of what Councillor Shoemaker is saying, and there are 2 points of view on this. I'm concerned that if we include the 10 million in the CapEx, particularly the 7.5 for Gordon Brook, it limits our ability to go to the state government, hand on heart, and honestly say that we haven't made provision for it, that we haven't got the money for it. If we build it into our CapEx now and we provide for it in our financial statements, it's really hard for me or any of us to go off to the minister and say, we haven't got the 7.5 million, we need it from the government. I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned if we do put it back in, the impact, it's actually going to send us into the red on our cash flow, which means we will have to go back and review our rating strategy, and we'll have to increase the 5 and 5 up to some higher figures. And please, Selena, you jump in here if I'm saying anything incorrect, please. But technically, that 7.5 million would mean rather than having plus 4.7, at the end we'd have plus 4.7 less 7.5, so it would be minus 2.8 million approximately. Am I on the right track?
I can follow your figures. Are you looking at model 15?
Model 15 with 5% on access and 5% on consumption, if we crank that up from 65 million back to the 75 million, we're going to take $10 million out of our bottom line, aren't we? Aaron, am I on the right track? So we won't be covering our CapEx program at all. We'd have to increase our rates to cover it. Correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that goes to Councillor Shoemaker's. It puts you in deficit on your previous model if you go there. So it would be identical. Yeah, we're close to model 14. So, yep.
Close to model 14 with a 5 and 5. Yeah, so we would be. Councillor Shoemaker, just in that context, still keen to hear your thoughts?
Look, I understand. The reality is that we will be in deficit. This is a $115 million problem that we have to solve. And whilst I'm hearing you, because with what you've said around, limiting our provision because it shows that we're funding it, well, actually it shows that we can't afford to fund it if we're running in a deficit. That's my view. So I'd probably like to understand more. Do we have to have, in all of our other budgets, we're running deficits. So does our 10-year forecast have to show that in years 9 and 10, we're in the black? That's a financial question. Do we have to demonstrate for our financial sustainability ratios that we're in the black for those years?
Just before you answer that question, I just want to add one thing. The issue here for me too is if we include it, it limits it. We can't ask for the funding from the government. If we include it in our 10-year forecast, we technically can't go and say to the government, we can't apply for external funding grants. That's correct. Now, we've talked about, well, we just won't produce a detailed list. But I mean, hand on heart, full disclosure, If we tip that 7.5 in there, we can't go and apply for grants then. It will take away our opportunity to do that.
My understanding was we can't apply for grants if it's in the first 3 years of our spend. Is that true?
Yes. Years of our spend.
So we would be applying for grants for Gordon Brook, and that would be in the first 3 years of our spend. So the 7.5 million would be in the first 3 years.
I'd planned to do the off-site storage within the next 3 years, knowing that it was a high priority. That was my understanding, Tim.
No, through
Are we
Mr.
talking about the off-stream storage or the spillway here?
About the off-site storage.
Yeah.
7.5 million is 5.5 for the off-site storage and 2 million for the extra allocation.
Yeah.
That's the 7.5.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, through you, what we clarified the other day is that the funding for that off-site storage is shown from 25-26 in the total program value, and it would be up to council to bring it forward if it was not to get a grant in that space. Sorry, Mayor, does that clear that one up?
Does, Tim? Yes, it does, Aaron. Thank you.
So my question before is, do we have an issue if we are running the last 2 years of our comprehensive income statement in a deficit because we cannot afford to fund the full capital works program?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So for water as a business unit, no, provided that you've got sewage or SBRC as a whole. So you don't want SBRC as a whole to be in deficit. If you've got a short-term strategy and water's running deficits and sewage is running surpluses, then the bottom line is you're running a surplus, so that's not going to affect your financial sustainability. Ideally, you want to get to the point where they're both sustainable on their own merits. I've just plugged in the rating strategies from Model 15 into Model 14, and you're running 4 years of deficits, 1.3 mil, 2.9 mil, 4.7 mil and 6 mil in outer years. So we would have to look at that. That's probably getting a bit high into your outer years. You probably don't want to be sitting at about 6 mil. If you've got a mil or where we were in this original one, that's probably fine.
So
I think too, Selena, there isn't enough in sewage to cross-subsidise because we were trying to track sewage up to the 15 billion for the Mergen sewage treatment plant by year 10. If we go and cross-subsidise that $6 million deficit across to water, bottom line, we're not going to track up to where we need to be for STP on Mergen OE.
doesn't my mind is boggling with this, and it has bothered me. And I've thought about it because we did have a robust discussion on Monday. Doesn't, in my mind, and please, I get that I'm an amateur at this, but doesn't it make us a much stronger case if when we go to government with 4 years of running deficits and say, government, we cannot impose these rate increases on our people. It's not achievable. We have significant urban water issues, and we, as you can see from our statement of comprehensive income and from the considerable amount of money that the people of the South Burnett are investing, we cannot sustainably fund our $115 million problem. Because what worries me is that sitting here in this seat, in my first year of council, I am confronted with a $115 million problem. And as Councillor Henshin had said, without a single extra drop of water, in some cases, I know there will be maybe some provision for some additional water that we may or may not be able to purchase, but besides that, we're looking at a giant issue that does not increase, that has to be done. This is not a maybe or can. This is a has to be done. So it just, for me, it boggles my mind. I cannot, my hand on my heart, put forward a CapEx program that isn't going to fix the problem. And I just see in my mind, and please, I welcome you to argue with me, I cannot see how going to the government running surpluses in this business unit is actually going to support our case for funding.
That being the case, councillor, and I've just, Mr. CEO's given me some of his years of wisdom here on this, because he's done many of these forecasts, I'm sure, over 2 decades. If that's the argument and we take that position, and I'm quite prepared to support you on that, then we'd have to plug in the 115 million to show that to the government, which is what you're saying. And then we'd have to show the government that in the outer years, we've got the rate rises that we'll have to levy then to meet that commitment. And if that's the position we want to take, then that's fine. It means we'll be putting 30% rate rises up in those outer years. And if that's what we want to do in our forward cash flow forecast, as part of demonstrating the issue that we've got, absolutely. Yeah. I just don't know what that issue that has for our audit, that's all. I guess that would that cause any issues from a audit point of view, Selena? If we CapEx the 115 million in 10 years, and then we rate model in the outer years what we need to cover that?
I think I'd have to take that one on notice. I'd have to think about that, because it's one thing to put the whole 115 million in there, and then you're either going to be running deficits, which we don't want to do, or if you start putting those rate increases, and I think it was about 15% on everything year on year we needed to cover that 115 mil. Is that realistic? Are we going to increase the rates 15%? Like, if I was QTC, my question would be, would you realistically do that? Or are you putting those percentages there just so to make it look like you're running a surplus? So I'd be more comfortable if we were putting percentages in there that we realistically can achieve, then yeah.
Yeah, look, and I'm hearing you, like, none of us, we all know that a 30% year-on-year increase is ridiculous. Like, that's not achievable. So I'm not arguing that. I just want to see us set this council up and the next council and the one after that with a solution to this problem. Now, $115 million over 20 years is what I understand, GM Meehan, is that correct?
Sorry, I'm trying to find the mic. Yeah, my understanding, Councillor, from Tim, is we're looking at 115 over the 20-year period. Yep.
So the 75 million, or 76 was where we started, was really just going to help fix our immediate problem and enable Kingaroy in some capacity to improve its water quality issues, as well as enable some potential growth in those 10 years. Have I got that right?
Yes, that's right. So that would be your immediate water security and growth issues. The larger program also includes renewals inside the next 10 years as well. Yep. So
renewals and the upgrades of assets that
that's right.
Clearly need to be upgraded. Yep.
Yep.
So I challenge that we'd have to put the 115 million in the 10 years. I think it's the $75 million CapEx spend, which is realistic for the 10-year period. And I do think that going to government with a surplus or running okay on our balance sheet for the next 10 years does not strengthen our argument for actually getting funding. That's my view. So certainly, CEO Mark, if you've got more information, I welcome your wealth of wisdom. And but my serious concern is the fact that the CapEx program, I don't see we have the benefit or the luxury of cutting things out, because I worry that's what previous councils have clearly done if we're in the position we're currently in now.
So Aaron, question to GM. Will the Model 14, $75 million, will that tick all the boxes you need for the next 10 years to keep the water supply network functioning well? And then the other 40 million happens in the following 10 years. So is that the full 20-year plan? $115 million, 75 in the first 10, 40 in the second? Because if that's the case, I will completely support Councillor Shoemaker on what she's saying.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So your budget is always on the 10 years. So I fully agree with the 115. The 115 is over the 20, which you won't model inside your budget. It'll only be your 10-year program, which is your 75. So your question will be: are you going to do the 70? In a lay version, it's the 75 or the 65 is where your discussion will be at for this year.
And I understand that,
Yep.
GM, but it's no good coming to us and saying to us that We need the other 40 million in year 11.
So,
And that's
so
what
to
I'm
answer
saying.
that,
Is the other 40 million spread over right out to year 20?
yeah, so through you, Ms. Mayor, I'll just get Tim to answer, but we're not intending on bringing that into the 10, no.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, as you're aware, one of those items out in year 11 is the Mergen wastewater treatment plant. But in answer to your question, yes, the next 20 years, those the projects above the 75 million is spread over the following 10 years.
Well, I'm very comfortable with that then. So, Selena, if we then go back and do model 14, as Councillor Shoemaker has suggested, $75 million with the rating strategy at 5 and 5, 5% access, 5% consumption, 1% on high volume commercial. Are we able to show council what we able to provide that information to council on screen so we can see what that looks like? Because that's what we'll be recommending up to council today, minus the
dividend, yes.
yeah, and without the dividend for 200. Are we able to get the spreadsheet up and make those adjustments?
Mr. Mayor, we just wanted to clarify too, just so councils fully understands that that additional water and that off-stream storage expenditure, that 7.5 million, is from 2025 onwards in that phasing. Just to reiterate that everyone's understands that's the case.
Yeah. So what then council is saying is that if we can't get funding from the government in the next couple of years, we won't do Gordon Brook until 25, 26, the Gordon Brook offsite storage. So it'll be 4 to 5 years of putting up with what we've got now.
Yeah, or you'll bring something forward if the scenario changes, if that's the case. So if you got funding for your wall, you might bring. So you'll look at it each year.
But we can't bring this forward within 3 years. Otherwise, we can't go out and apply for grants. So we couldn't bring it forward while we're seeking grants. Is that correct, Darren?
Yeah, in general, in our experience, there has been restrictions placed on funded projects within budget. So there may be an opportunity for 3-year projects to be. It depends on the grant funding. But in the past experience, and I'm happy to be corrected by the Chief Executive, 90% of my experience is that any project that is funded in your 3 years is normally excluded, generally.
So if it's in our, if we're saying we're not going to do Gordon Brook until year 5, then we generally, from experience, should say wouldn't be excluded. Okay.
Thanks, Mayor. So a couple of things, and good debate. Is that it's particularly the Commonwealth grant funding that doesn't like to see it in a future or budgeted for, because I think in one of the earlier conversations it comes along that if you've already got it budgeted for, you really don't need to apply to us for the money. It's almost like going to the bank and we won't give you the loan unless you can show that you've got the loan, but in this it's the reverse. The point I was making to with the Mayor before Councillor was that when we look at the consolidated numbers for the outer years, is the rate rise in the outer years will need to marry up so that we're not increasing or impacting the deficit. So you end up with the higher rates in the outer years. It might not be 30% or 10%, it might be 15 or whichever the number is. So the outer years, it will be, with whatever result we will be today is, and I think you raised it in your question before to the floor, is that what impact will that have on our sustainability ratio? So you may have a marrying or adjusting of those outer year rates to make sure that we don't trip over a sustainability indicator.
So, Mr. C, I could take 2 points there. Number one, I just want to say the highest likelihood that the funding for Gordon Brook will come from a federal source, because they're most likely to have a federal fund around water, more so than the state, in terms of programs. My solution would be to go to the government and seek a federal program for regional urban water, alongside the NWIDF current program. If that's the case, you're saying that the 3-year rule does then tend not to apply, that if it's in our budget even in year 5, that the feds might look at it favourably.
It really is each program. That would be a very hard question to answer, just because each program tends to have its own. The feds, the 3-year rule, the Commonwealth grants tend to be a lot more, well, I'm generalising, but they tend to be much more specific on if councils adopted or programmed it in their budget, in their next budget. So you just got to be cautious of the grants. Now, in those outer years, I mean, this budget does get looked at every year, and there are a couple of significant differences over the way councils approach the capital. Has a lot more information now available to it than it ever has in the history, and we have a much broader and better understanding of the networks. So the time is now to start making some decisions about the future of the network, and certainly taking all the comments on board. We're well placed with the information that we have to advocate for funding, but yeah, we would just need to be cautious of the grant programs, and then adjust, possibly be flexible in our adjustment of those applications.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. CEO. I'm just not wanting to trip over ourselves here and lock ourselves out of a potential grant program. So, Selena, just what we're getting up there now, so is we've got the Model 14 with the 5 and 5. You can see you're bringing that up. And then, 6 in the outer years, but just for the 21-22, 5 and 5, 6 in the outer years as previous. That's what we've modelled, yep. Okay. And we pulled out the 200K dividend. It's gone. Oh, it's going. Yep, that's right. So that changes our income statement without the 200K dividend. We break even in year 2 and move into surplus year 3 onwards in the operating surplus, and then the statement of cash flows. Leanne, if we just roll that down, statement of cash flows, then that's how it would roll out over the 10 years with that model. And so have we got the 10 million back in 25-26 there, have we now? Oh no, that's the 75, in 25-20.
Yep.
That's
This
in
was the original
25-26,
model.
isn't it? Yeah, so that's assuming we didn't do anything with Gordon Brook off-site storage for 5 years. Yeah, okay. Right, well there it is, Council. That's, I think, Councillor Shoemaker, is that sort of what you wanted to show? Any changes to that?
Yeah, no, I think it's really important that we have the whole picture for us looking ahead, particularly as we look to a way to solve this problem. And, you know, I'm mindful of the grant funding requirements, and certainly, you know, next year we might need to adjust our capital works program. Anything can happen. We've seen that with the Nanango sewage relining project. You know, we weren't prepared to do that. We had to do that sooner than we anticipated. I see over the next 10 years we are running the gauntlet, and there very well could be, in some instances, cases where we have to bring capital forward or push it back to prioritise other projects. That's what I've heard. And, you know, from all the work that's been put, all the information, CEO Mark, you're absolutely right. You know, we are in such a good position to make informed informed decisions about this problem. And the reality that, you know, we know that it's a $115 million problem over the next 20 years, and we're going to take a big chunk of that problem and really stare it down as we work toward finding a solution over the next 10 years. I'm fully supportive of that.
Thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. Look, I'm happy to support this, subject to 2 things. One, that all the councillors in this room understand that could put us if we adopt that budget, it could put us at risk of not getting access to federal funding. I think there needs to be an understanding that it may put us at risk if we adopt that budget, showing that we can fund it ourselves. So I'm happy to support it as long as we all acknowledge and accept that could be the case, that there's no misunderstandings there. The second thing is, Selena, is what does those 3 outer years being in deficit, going back to Councillor Shoemaker's earlier question, does that create a problem in terms of our sustainability ratio, in terms of our audit? Is that going to raise any eyebrows of auditors if they see those 3 red numbers on the bottom of the forecast there? Noting that sewerage won't have enough to cover that because it's got its own $15 million spend coming up in year 10.
So water, sewage, waste are not ever presented by themselves. They're always presented as SPRC as a whole. So when we do our QTC long-term forecast, we do SPRC as a whole. So nowhere is it reported that this is an internal this is our internal way of making sure that our units are performing how they should. So in this instant, yes, it's running these deficits, but what will happen is that sewerage is running surpluses, and up to that, I think it's at 12 million at the moment. So if sewerage is running the surpluses, we will revisit this every year. So we're talking 10 years. Who knows where we're going to be or where we're going to be in 10 years' time. So at this point, I'm comfortable that sewerage, the surplus you're making in sewerage, well and truly covers that deficit. And as SBRC as a whole, we're not making a deficit, if that makes sense.
Good answer. Thanks, Lena. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, Mr Mayor. With this proposed 10-year plan that I actually fully support, I think it's a great idea. I think it shows good initiative, good leadership, and yeah, we're taking a risk, but I think it's a risk well worth taking. A couple of questions that I have. So this is proposed obviously without any funding at all. So this is just the bare bones of it all. So if there was, hypothetically and in a perfect world, we get funding and all that sort of stuff, certainly going to change that. And the other thing is if we get 3, 4, 5 years in there, and Councillor Shoemaker touched on it, you might have to bring projects forward, you might have to push them back, whatever. This forecast can be changed or altered. Okay, yep. Comfortable with where we're at.
Look, the only lingering concern I've got is I just don't know if we can wait 5 years to do Gordon Brook. With the water quality we've got in Kingaroy now, I just don't know if I can go to the Kingaroy community and say, guys, we can't fix the water problem, the lack of supply problem. If Gordon Brook stays at less than 50% for the next 5 years, that means we've got 5 years of running the gauntlet on the Boondooma pipeline. And I just don't know about the timing of that, gents. I would much prefer to see that CapEx on Gordon Brook, that $7.5 million, was brought forward with inside this term of council, because look, I'd be just nervous about running it for 5 years. I'm keen to hear what Tim thinks on that, but I just think 25, 26 is too late to leave it. In terms of, we THM levels we've got Gordon Brook doesn't seem to ever get much over 50% without a lot of rain. If we get a flood, it'll change, but doesn't look like we're going to get one anytime soon. What are your thoughts on that, Tim?
Yeah, I might answer, Mr Mayor, if that's okay. Through you, with Gordon Brook out in year 5, it does give you the opportunity to make the case for those grants inside that it's not funded currently inside the 3. My suggestion is would come back to, if we were unsuccessful through that grant or through your advocacy that you're planning on doing, we would bring that back to council to see how that project could be funded from the water and wastewater reserves, with the opportunity that there might be that we could delay some capital works back a year or something like that. Still would be delivered inside that time frame, but we may be able to change some of that phasing to bring it forward. So we would, a bit like the sewer relining, if we were unable to fund it or we're unable to see a grant, then we would have to come back to council for a change. If you put it inside your 3, you would be a good chance, in my experience, of being locked out of funding if it was to come out. That's just all.
But are we not? We're talking about telling the truth here and putting it down in the facts, as you're saying, Councillor Shoemaker, but we're not, because we're putting it in year 5, and the reality is that, in my view, we can't wait 5 years. So shouldn't we tell it as it is and say, no, it's got to be done, and maybe push some of the other things? If we're going to do a CapEx for 10 years, let's do it correctly and put the 75 million where it should be, and then let's look at what that does to our deficits. It seems to me we're sort of saying, yeah, let's do it, but not fully.
I hear what you're saying, but I think what you've just put forward is the perfect political argument for this problem. The fact that it cannot wait 5 years. There's no way it can wait 5 years. I don't think anybody in this room is suggesting that it can. The reality is we're hamstrung at the moment, and unless we get significant grant funding or support, it may just have to wait 5 years. I think it strengthens your political argument at this point in time. Next year, Mr. Mayor, I'm not willing. I'm all in on this problem, and certainly next year, we very well may be in a very different circumstance. But right now, I think 12 months of strong advocacy, a balance sheet, a statement like that, and a narrative that we've got, all of the information with the MIP, I think we're in a good position to actually put forward a very strong case for funding. And I agree. I think it will be Commonwealth funding, and the federal budget announcements. It looks like there might be some provisions for water infrastructure in those announcements. So I'm feel much stronger in our argument for support with the balance sheet the way it is, and actually saying, look, based on what we know, there's no way our community can wait 5 years. There's no way we can risk some of our commercial operations, particularly here in Kingaroy, might go down because we have such an increased risk of failure. That's my position on this.
Councillor Jones?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. And Councillor Shoemaker's putting up a very good argument as far as going to the government, federal or whatever, and state. And I believe that, you know, with your concerns, and I understand totally, and I don't believe that we're playing smoke and mirrors here. If we put it into the fifth year and all that sort of stuff, and again, as Selena has indicated, this gets reviewed every 12 months, and we have the ability as a council to change that every you know, and look at it and readjust. And you know, if we don't get any funding, and I'll just throw this out there at left field, and I know this is a sacred word in this chamber at the moment, but if we were pushed, you know, push come to shove, there's no better time now than to borrow money at the lowest interest rate we possibly have. So we've got that in 12 months' time. If we, as you say, you know, you believe that it needs to be done in this term, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but I also support Councillor Shoemaker in the fact that it is a good political argument, and you know, I think Councillor Shoemaker touched on it. You said that you don't believe it can wait until the 5 years, and if we're putting it in our 5-year forecast, and we understand that we need to do it in the first 3, but it can, at this stage, as we currently sit, we can take it to the 5th year. I can't see where we're, you know, doing anything wrong and not being transparent. I think that we're putting it in the 5th year, understanding that that's our goal. Yes, we do understand that it's, you know, it needs to be done, but yeah, I don't think we're trying to hide anything, and I just think that we have ample options moving forward in the 12-month period. Like, we can review it in 12 months. We've got the option, push come to the shove, and we're in a pretty good position. And yes, we don't want to borrow money and extend our debt and all that. You know, people in the community will hang us and all that sort of stuff. But people say to you, you know, if you sit around and you wait, you achieve nothing. And this is something that's critical to us. I think we all in this chamber, the staff and everything, I think we all understand that it is a critical thing. Water, our John Zala today said that water is such an important thing. It has been for a long period of time. And, you know, I think we do. I can't see an issue with us putting it in the 5th year, understanding that, yes, it is a high priority, but I just don't see where we're not being transparent there. And if we do be successful in the next 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, and get funding for it, it's all a bonus. We can do that. So I'm comfortable with what Councillor Shoemaker's proposing, and happy to support it. And yeah, look, I'll acknowledge that it's, you know, it's out there and it's outside the box, but it's strategic and it's forward planning. And I'm happy to support it.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Just on the borrowings, we'll get this resolved shortly because I'm coming across. Just on the borrowings, we have had that comment made before that there's no better time to borrow than now. Do we lock in the interest rate for 20 years, Selena? Or is there interest rate risk? Because I just want to clarify that, Councillor Jones, because I'm just a bit nervous about that position, that view that was forming in council, that borrow now, interest rates are 3%. Do we lock in the rate for 20%?
Fixed for 20 years.
We do.
Yep.
So we could borrow now at whatever the going rate is, 3%, and we can lock that in for 20 years.
Yep. So I think it was 2.49 or something.
So we can get a fixed rate of 2.49 for 20 years, QTC, and I'll guarantee that. So even if the market rate goes up to 12% in 5 years' time, which it could well do, we'll be still at 2 point. Do they lend to other businesses? Because I reckon the farmers will be queuing up to borrow money from QTC at 2.4%, fixed for 12. Because if you go to the bank right now and ask for a 20-year fixed loan, A, they won't give it to you, it'll be 12%. So to get fixed at 2.4%, well, well, your statement's accurate, Councillor Jones. That's great. Yeah, excellent. Okay. All right. So fixed for 20 years, interest rates. Wow. Okay. That's amazing. Anyone else want to comment before we put this to the vote then? So we've got that in front of us now. We just need to get a motion up around this. Back to the Word document. Thanks, Danelle.
So I'm happy to move a recommendation, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please proceed, Councillor Schmicker.
that, what should we call this model, Selena? Shows the work that we've done. So I think we're up to 17.
Let's call it 14.1.
That the committee recommends to council
Model 16.
Model 16 for water and wastewater with a capex spend of 75 million over the next 10 years. Rating assumptions for 2021-22. Yep. Access 5%. Consumption residential / commercial 5%. High volume commercial 1%. All out years 6%, except high volume commercial at 1%. I think that's just on access, or is that consumption too?
That's consumption as well. And we just need to change the front part of it that says Model 16 for water and wastewater. We haven't finished wastewater, so it's just Model 16 for water.
For water.
And the capex spend for water, it's 75% over both, but if we're just doing the water resolution, it should be the 61 mil 636,370.
So the Model 16 for water with a capex spend of 61,636,370. My gosh, that's a big number. So that the committee recommends to council that Model 16 for water with a capex spend of $61,636,370 over the next 10 years, with rating assumptions for 2021-22 access charge 5%, consumption residential commercial 5%, high volume commercial 1%, and all out years 6%, except high volume commercial at 1%. I'd like to move that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. So we have that moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Duff, seconded. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. That's water done. Thank you, Tim. We'll move on to sewerage. And I notice that I seem to lose most debates in the chamber. You don't lose any. Let's move on. Okay, we need a bit of humour to keep us going at this time of day, so please bear with my sick sense of humour. Okay, so we're up to sewerage, better known as wastewater, and 6.3 on the agenda, committee, and we will go to Model 13 on the page 5. Is that correct, Selena?
That's correct.
Okay, so this is the model that we walked through the other day. Selena, can you just, Tim's taken off. He obviously is not interested in his sewerage budget. Aaron, he's left you to hold the fort. Okay, finance and infrastructure team, talk us through Model 13 on page 5. Thank you.
I'll make a start for him, Mr. Mayor. He's actually stepped out to get his value out of his model. With that's Tim's model based on I think it's 14 million in capex for sewage, and obviously the treatment plant is in year 11 of that model. So the idea of that one, Selena, correct me wrong, is to build up that cash reserve by year 10, and then it follows the sewage OPEX model, which was presented through that as well. So now I'll let Selena talk through the revenue, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay. I wouldn't do any justice in that space.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Over to you, Selena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this Model 13 is a recap from our last workshop. The difference between what we did last time and this time is we found a formula error in when we were trying to do those changes to the pedestals on the fly. So I've corrected that. So you'll notice that in your cash flow, that in the previous model, when we looked at this, we were trying to target the 15 mil. With the change in the formula, it's actually sitting around the 18 mil at the moment. So we can review that, or leave it as the 18, or we can play with the numbers to get it down to 15. So for this model, it's all years at 5% indexation. It's got the changes to the hospital and educational second pedestals, and that was where we looked at 28% to 39% in year 1 and 39% to 50% in year 2. And for the commercial and flats, we were looking at 28% to 33.5% in year 1 and 33.5% to 39% in year 2. So that gives you the additional revenue of the 128,853 in year 1. In year 2, you get an additional 157,901, but you still retain the 128. So that's the additional revenue you're getting year on year for this model. For your income statement, you'll see that at the moment, so this does still have a $255,000 dividend in there that would have to be removed. So at this stage, it's got $659,000 surplus. It is still short of paying your principal payments in year 1. However, it is paying the principal in the outer years after that. In our cash flow, you'll see you remain cash positive every year, and you end up with $18 million in 2031. We wanted to be around the 15 to do that treatment plant, the sewage treatment plant. So this model probably needs a little bit of tweaking if we want to bring it back to 15, or we'd leave it at the 18 to cover the 3 deficit in water. Yeah, and you will actually probably have more revenue in that, because I'd need to go back through and take the dividend out, because that dividend is in every year and it's indexed every year. I haven't known, because I didn't know about it till now. So this was modelled before we did it. Yeah. Sorry?
Is it hard to go back and just quickly pull that dividend out? We'll wait for you.
Yeah, it'll only take me a minute.
Could you jump in and do that for us?
Yep.
Is that okay? Thank you.
Yep.
Just while you're doing that, Councillor Duff's got Councillor Potter's got her light on. So if you want to just do that, Selena, we'll come back to you shortly. Councillor Potter?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I really like Model 13 as opposed to 14. I think putting the second pedestal charges up to that percentage rate, I just think we don't need to do that, to be quite honest. I'm quite happy keeping them at these rates and no more than what we've got written down here, and up to the 50%.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. If I could just clarify, Model 14, though, is to take the pressure off the residents and the pensioners. So with Model 14, rather than increasing the first pedestal for 739 to 776, which is an extra, whatever that says up there, $37, it would mean that there would be no, so in Model 14, there's no increase from the 739. So I asked Selena to present that, Councillor Potter, because when we looked yesterday at the comparative costs between our pedestal charges and other councils, we were particularly high. And our first pedestal at 739 was particularly high compared to many other councils. So it was to say, well, what if we just what if we just kept the 739 as the first pedestal for all the residents, and then we increased the second pedestal from up to 80 and 40 over 2 years? So I just want to clarify that because that might not have been obvious in what you can see there. I'm just concerned that if we go 739 to 776, that's a $37 rise. And if we keep tracking and increasing that every year at 5%, it won't take long for that to get into the 800s, that first pedestal. So, look, it was just another option to consider, Danita, at this stage. Yeah, just want to clarify that. And Councillor Duff, you had your...
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I was going to raise that too, because when we looked at that Mead Perry and the comparisons, it was the first pedestal, we were right up there. It was the second pedestal where we were right down, and I couldn't understand then why we would be whacking the residential people just up with that first pedestal, because that's going to hit everybody. But we were trying to target that second pedestal. That was our end goal, but we went right away from that and then put the first pedestal up. So that's why I was going to make that comment as well.
It's a good question, Councillor Potter, because, just to clarify for everyone, the second model 14 is a 0% rise on the first pedestal on the basis that it is particularly high compared to other councils already, whereas the second pedestal was where you had the problem. But anyway, it's there for discussion. There's two options there to consider and discuss. So, Selena, have we got the 255 out?
No, I was going to just ask, can we have the conversation with what the difference is between Model 13 and 14, so we can make an idea of where you want to land with the revenue, because then I'll open that model and adjust that, rather, because otherwise I might pull the wrong model up, if that makes sense. Because so both models have different revenue in there, so based on those.
If that's where you'd like to take it, that's fine.
Yeah, that way. Otherwise, I'll have to do both models.
No, that's fine. So you want to just do a comparison, explain 13 and 14 and talk us through how that affects the cash flow. That'd be great. Thanks.
No, that's fine. So for your first model, the additional pedestals, Model 13, your additional pedestals were going for hospital education, 28 to 39%, and then 39 to 50%. For commercial and flats, we were looking at doing the 50% sort of concession on that and going from the 28 to 33.5 and the 33.5 to 39 in year 2. So that gives you the additional revenue, which is less than Model 14. So with Model 14, the changes in the additional pedestals were the 28% to 54% in year 1, as opposed to the, what do we have on the other one? 39 as opposed to 39, and then from 54 to 80, and then for your commercial and flats it was 28% to 34 in year 1 as opposed to your 28 to 33.5, and then up to the 40% in year 2. So I just wanted to have some idea on which of those options the council preferred, because from there we can then model the change in the dividend and what you want to do with the expenditure side.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Selena. So can we look at the bottom line, like the 10-year cash flow on each of those two models, see what the difference is?
So for your Model 13, you're up around the 18 mil. But in Model 14, even though you're getting more additional revenue from the change in the classification of, or the increase in your second pedestal, you're actually only going to end up with about 9.9 mil in year 10. Because your first pedestal's at $739, and there's more first pedestals than additional, like you've got all the first pedestals at the higher amount. So when you add the increase onto it, you get a higher amount back.
What was the first, sorry, Mr Mayor, what was the first pedestal charge put up to? $739. So
currently $739.
And it's gone up to?
And it was, in the first model, it was a 5% increase. And in the second model, it's no increase at all.
So in the first model, Councillor Jones, 5% it would go from $739 to $776, which is a $37 rise. I was just concerned that on top of all the other rises with the water, the wheelie bins, etc., that we're really going to be, well, my concern is that that's going to be hitting the hip pocket of the pensioners and our
Yeah.
families across residents.
Um,
That was my concern,
Yeah,
councillor.
Mr Mayor, I've got to say
Um,
that I'd like to, me personally, I'm in favour of leaving that first pedestal charge as it is and adjusting your percentages on your additional pedestals on what you've got there on 14. We've got it on that 14, is it 13? Model 13, where we've got 18 million. And if you take, we haven't taken the adjustment into account for the non-dividend, so we're talking 2.5 million there. That'll put you up to nearly 21 million. In 10 years, I think we're starting to get a little bit greedy, and I'd like to just leave that first pedestal where it is and adjust the second pedestal percentages accordingly.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that because I think that the first pedestal is right up there. We're as dear as anybody on that first pedestal.
I'm really keen to hear you. Thanks, Councillor Jones. Really hear, Councillor Froeloff, this is your space, so what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Jones and Councillor Duff to leave that first pedestal because we are up there. And yeah, I don't like the ratepayer is paying enough at the moment and just, yeah, be nice and not greedy.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Froeloff. Councillor Potter, sorry, coming back to you now. Yeah, thanks
Yeah,
again.
all right.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, to be quite honest, reading through this, I didn't sort of see that the first pedestal charge was staying the same. So now that you've set me straight, I'm actually in agreement with you on this, on model number 14.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Henson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'd be happy to leave the first pedestal charges where they are and agree with Councillor Froeloff and Duff and Jones and Councillor Potter. And but correct me if I'm wrong, but again, these can all be reviewed. So it's not like we're turning every stone, but we're not necessarily setting stuff in concrete. So yeah, I'm supportive to certainly leave that first pedestal as it is. We talk about the pensioners, not too many pensioners have got second pedestals anyway, so yeah, and yeah, support what Councillor Jones and Froeloff have said.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Henson. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, just to be clear, Councillor Henson, it won't impact second pedestals for residential users of the wastewater network. It will just be hospitals, education, and those commercial and flats. And I've read through some of the feedback around the flats, but I'm fully supportive of some increase to the flats because the reality is you've got more people living in a smaller space, and every one of those facilities has a toilet. So it doesn't make sense to me if you've got a block of 20 people living in 10 flats that they only pay for one pedestal, like what Mrs. Jones next door may pay, where, you know, actually having some cost recouped for our network over those 20 people living in those 10 flats. That does make a lot more sense to me. So I do understand that. And I'm glad to see that we've adjusted these rates because I do think what we were originally thinking around those second pedestals was too high. It was too much too soon. I will be interested to see what the bottom line comes back to without that dividend and certainly without touching the access charge. So and see if there's any need to potentially maybe reduce the impact on those second pedestals based on how much revenue we need. So that's probably just where I just want to be sure that the rates that we've proposed here are reasonable. So that's my only thinking. Otherwise, fully supportive, and thank you for the work that's been done on this. I know it's been quite painstaking.
Thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. Councillor Froeloff.
Thank you, Mayor. I do understand, Councillor Shoemaker, where you're coming from and that, but like my concern with putting the pedestals, second pedestals up too far is that the units flats and all that, it's still going to go back onto the people that book into the motels and rent these flats. The business, the owners of those flats aren't going to pay it. They're going to put it on to the person that's renting. Same with the motels, and we want tourism up here. And the issue is once this all goes ahead and the second pedestal goes up, they're going to all these tourist places and motels and hotels and everything, they're going to put it on to the person that's using them. So I'm happy with our decision.
Yeah, I'd have to
So-
agree with Councillor Froeloff there that I think 40% is well and truly enough for the flats and the units and the motels over the next 2 years.
Sorry,
That any more could be, yeah.
I think you misread me. I was actually thinking about reducing it from the proposed 34 and 40% and 54 and 80% based on whatever the cash flow comes through, because I'm still feeling those rates are high. Sorry if I've been misunderstood there, but certainly I actually, looking at those numbers, I want to see the full model before I make the decision. But I actually think, based on the feedback we've had from commercial operators and property owners, certainly I'm still thinking 34 and 40% over year 1 and 2, even though we've subsidised them. They're much less than what hospitals and education facilities will pay. I'm still worried they're too high. So I probably want to see that cash flow before I make the decision. My apologies for the misunderstanding.
So that being the case, Linda, can we go back now that we've given you what you asked for, model 14, okay?
Model 15.
No, model 14,
Yep, it's now model 15. Ready to go.
good. So it's exactly the rating strategy from 14,
Yep,
but with the 255 dividend out.
that's correct.
You're very fast. Well done. You've just got to work out how to make that computer work.
That included no increase to the access?
Correct.
Yes.
And no dividend.
All right. Okay.
Okay, we've just got a technical problem here again.
Oh,
Here we go.
I thought I did something.
Well, looks like we're coming back online. Yeah, right. Thanks. We'll just note that Councillor Pollard's just got to go out to make a quick call for another meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're up to a model 15 now.
Yep. Okay. So,
And-
where do we
and-
wanna start?
Can I just confirm so that what you've done here, model 15 is, so no increase to the first pedestal, it's 0%, it stays at 739.
That's correct.
And we're then going,
I haven't
to-
increased the additional either. The only increase in additional, so I've got 100% on additional and 100% on first pedestal and 3% on access. And I didn't increase the additional because you're going to get an increase by the change where you're going up to the 40% and stuff. So I
sorry,
haven't
so
added it.
what's that, what's access?
Have a charge for access. Everyone has a charge for access.
For sewerage?
Yep. And then you have your first pedestal charge. And then if you have additional pedestals, you then get charged for additional
Oh,
pedestals.
okay, so we haven't factored that in, have we, into our increases for our residents? This access, I'm just looking at the rates notice. So how is that shown on the rates notice, that access? Because I've got my rates notice here and I've got no sewerage access charge on mine.
We'd better fix that up.
I thought we only had a water access charge. I didn't realise we had a sewerage access charge, Tim, or have you introduced something that I didn't know about, Manager?
No, can't blame me, Mr. Mayor, but yeah, I haven't seen the rates notice either, and I'm not the rating expert, unfortunately.
Oh, well, Mr. Manager, I can assure you that you don't charge an access charge, and if you want to try and slip one in, you're going to have to be better than that.
Sorry, that might be vacant. Access for vacant. Yeah, that'd be vacant land access. Yeah.
That's better. Thank you. I was worried that we were going to charge our residents more. Okay, so we got no increase, 739 stays as is. Okay. And then we're going, transitioning to 40% over 2 years on transitioning to 80% over 2 years on hospitals and education, which means we go from 28 to 54 and then from 54 to 80. On all others, which is commercials and flats and units and motels, caravan parks, etc., we go transitioning to 40% over 2 years, which means we go up to 34%, which is a 6% in the first year, and another 6% rise in the second year from 34 up to 40. So that's our rating strategy, yeah? So we've got that right. And we've now removed the $255,000 per year in dividends. Selena, is that right? My apologies for questioning you on the access charge. Okay, so how does that look in terms of the, Councillor Shoemaker, just how does that look at the cash flow forecast then? Thank you.
Do you want me to hide some lines so it's not so confusing and just do the totals?
So just while you're hiding those lines, that nine's now increased up to 12.7 million on sewerage with that model, yeah?
Yep, 12.7, yep.
But you've got 15 million coming in year 11, Tim, on the Mergen sewage treatment plant you're going to need, aren't you? So we're probably still a little bit short there for you.
Yeah, correct, Mr. Mayor. And just a point to remember is that's 15 million at today's market. So in 10 years' time, that could be 18 million. Yeah.
Okay, councillors. Well, there it is. That's model 15, which what we're proposing at this stage. It still leaves us a bit short, probably of where Tim will need us. We could potentially, we'll just say Tim 18, we could be 5 odd million short to do the Mergen sewage treatment plant. But as you said, it's a work in progress year in, year out. So
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Keen to hear from.
We don't
Yep,
know what
sorry,
funding
Tim.
it's going to be in the future. So we don't know what the arrangements are going to be for the environmental stuff. So we might have offset trading. We can extend our treatment plants out longer than what we expect too.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah. Okay, keen to hear from councillors now. Councillor Shoemaker. Yep.
Yeah, just it's my understanding with the Kingaroy treatment plant, we got significant funding. So would there be a likelihood that there'd be other government grants similar to what we've talked about with the water situation, that we would have to start planning for that much sooner than, certainly you wouldn't wait the 10 years, but just trying to understand the potential funding options. If we've got 12 million in the bank, well, we've got a good chunk of money there to invest in our own assets. Just keen to hear what our likelihood of funding for the Mergen wastewater treatment plant may be.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've been in a good position. Just probably for council's history, we actually got the MIP grant because council had no forward programming for these major projects. And the first phase of the MIP was to actually get yourself to feasibility ready, so you can see that forward projection and have those concepts, which would probably put our stock up considerably in supplying for grants. There is other stages of MIPs that you can get where you can actually get right into detailed design. So given that we've done the MIP, we would be as good a chance as anybody in trying to have a go at some of these things now going forward. So that was our whole purpose of trying to get a plan together, but also making ourselves ready to at least move into some sort of funding program if we can. So yeah, we will actively pursue.
Yeah, based on that, Mr. Mayor, certainly I am worried about the commercial operators, the motels, hotels, tourism operators. I know this will, Councillor Frolloff's absolutely right. Private schools, I definitely want to see us. We did talk about a potential policy to reduce the burden on some of those, and I definitely think that is a requirement. But looking at this, 12 and 6, on second pedestals is certainly a lot less than what we originally thought. So, of course, none of us want to see an increase, but I can't see any other way to do this at this point in time.
Thanks, Councillor Schumacher. Councillor Jones.
Oh, thanks, Mr Mayor. Understanding, I think the Mayor touched on it this morning in other conversations, that the schools and that in particular, hospitals, they don't pay any rates or any general rates for a start, so they're off to a good start. I understand that. If we start putting budgets together and expenditure and revenue and all that sort of stuff, and relying and hoping on grants and all that sort of stuff in the future, I think we're playing with our own destiny there. I think we need to look at actual figures, what our revenue is, and if we do happen to get grants, and I fully understand that we need, in a perfect world again, it's we get grants, funding and all that sort of stuff, and it certainly eases the burden on that. And going back to what Councillor Henson said, this, and Selena, we can review this every 12 months and we can adjust charges and fees and all that sort of stuff accordingly. But to me, I'm happy where we sit on that particular, with this one. I understand the commercial, I do understand all that sort of stuff. And we are lower than where we initially thought we were going to be and all that sort of stuff, which I'm happy to see that, but I just think, I'm happy to support those figures that I see in front of me on, 15? Model 15. So yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, I know, and I get it. I own a hotel, and I dare say that my rates will be affected by it. So, and understand that. And Councillor Froloff is exactly right. The flats, the hotels, all that sort of stuff, all these commercial buildings, it'll all be passed on to the people, and it always comes back to the old statement: user pays. And that's just the unfortunate beast of what we call the world and society, and that's what we live in. So so without gibbering on too much, I'm happy with what those figures are in front of us on Model 15 to support that moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones. Councillor Potter, other councillors want to add anything else to that at this stage? Comfortable?
I'm very happy with this, yes.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Duff?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. I'm concerned about the flats and the units and the motels and the hotels and the caravan parks, but I don't really see that we've got a choice, and particularly as the second pedestal is way below, or well, it's below the average, and we're sort of only just trying to bring them up to what other regions are doing. So I guess that's why we've challenged the second pedestal for those groups, but just concerned about where what's got the ramifications. But I guess right now they're probably doing better than they've done for a long time with regards to the COVID, and they're all sort of booked out. So maybe it's probably the best time we're going to get to actually do this. So yeah.
Councillor Henson, your thoughts?
No, I'm supportive of it, and we're right. We're going to affect certain business houses and hospitals, schools. Take on board they don't pay general rates, but as Councillor Duff has alluded to, we've had incredible, because of COVID, there's been some positives come out of it. And if we want to look on the positive side of things, look at our facts and figures at all our parks and resorts and things. They've been going gangbusters. Sometimes there's too much negativity posted out there instead of the positivity. So, as Councillor Duff said, I don't know whether it's a great opportunity is the right word or phrase to coin it, but we're only putting ourselves probably where we should be, and probably should have been several years ago. So, and we can revise it. We can look at it down the track. So, yeah, I'm comfortable with where we're at with this.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Henson. Councillor Froloff?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As I said, I'm supportive of Model 15, but yeah, as I stated, that I've got concerns that it will be users pay with the flats units, the private schools, and that. But we have to get this done, and this is the best option at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Froloff. I think it's sensible debate we've had here, and agree with Councillor Henson. There's a lot of positives out there we don't always tend to focus on, and just said we'll have opportunities to again reconsider this each year in the budget. So think I agree with very much what Councillor Henson said there as well. But Councillor Jones,
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just want to, for anybody that's watching out there, and this is just my view, I haven't made a decision or supported this because of the tourism and all that sort of stuff doing so well. This is I've made my decision. I'm pretty confident that most of the people, all the people in this room that are going to have the opportunity to vote on it, are voting on it simply because we've got the opportunity to put us in comparison with other regions around us. It's not, this is not a greedy, I haven't made it on a greed thing, thinking, everyone's doing it well, they can afford it. This is just basically bringing us back into alignment with other regions around us.
yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones, and I think Council's probably doing the best we can to phase it in over 2 years. That's probably all we can do at this stage. Look, I just think we can get, the time's getting on, if we can get a motion in front of the committee, perhaps we could just put that there, Linnell, that model 15 for, you've got it, for wastewater with a CapEx spend of, I think it's $14.041 million. Okay, over the next 10 years with rating assumptions for 21, 22. Access charges, what do we call that? That's that land, vacant land access charge of 3%. And then we had the first pedestal 0%. And second pedestal for hospitals and educational facilities. Selena, help me out here. We went to
We went to 54%.
54%.
Dollar or percentage?
Percentage.
Go 54%.
54%. Yep.
In year one.
In year one, and
80%.
80% in year two, and
Because then I can round it.
how do we categorize the others? Any
I have
advice?
them down as commercial and flats.
Commercial / flats. And we went to 34% in year one and 40% in year two. Council committee, if you just want to have a look at that, Mr. CEO, staff, any suggested changes to that before I put that forward as a motion? Just take a little bit of time to have a look at it. Councillor Duff?
Yeah, I just wanted to, with regards to what we said before about the private schools, there'll be lots of sporting clubs and included in all of this. Is that a separate resolution that we would look at?
I think the sporting clubs, would they be picked up in the 34 and 40%? But don't we already have a schedule of discounts that we give to not-for-profits and sporting clubs? I saw that 75% on some, 50 on others. Isn't that already there? That would then come back and address that?
So we don't need to add that into this, no.
I think that's a separate process, isn't it, Mr. CEO? Yeah. Schools, do we need to clarify what we're doing there? Thinking about that? Not here, not in this resolution, Mr. CEO. No. Okay, that's a separate policy matter.
Mr. Mayor, it's been touched on by several councillors already this afternoon. Some of this will start the ball rolling. We've got notes about how we deal with some of the intricacies of this, for want of a better term. Council and supporting what's been said, and I know absolutely it's not been its impact on the network, and absolutely, for the record, not based on capacity to pay, because council would not make a consideration or a decision based on the capacity of the owner to pay. It is absolutely, we don't do that. So, and that has been reiterated here this afternoon. You're not-for-profits, concessions with concessional policy, so whether that will need to be tweaked, you moved on Kindies the other day in the recommendation up that they go to 50% on water utilities, sewage utilities, I think, from recollection. So, yeah, it'll be one that we'll need to have a good look at, but this will allow the budget modelling to move forward, and schools and private schools, well, then they're all equitably charged, and then it'll be a question of how do we deal with that going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, for clarifying that. This certainly is in no way, this motion intended to be based on capacity to pay. It's really about, I think Councillor Jones put it really well, about bringing us into line with what we've seen of the modelling from our Mead Perry have done that modelling as an external agency, bring us into line with some of the modelling across the state, and also enabling council to, in its forward projections, start to provide for the cost of delivering the network into our forward forecasts. Selena, did you have anything you want to add in terms of that motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Do we need to put in the indexation for your out years?
Oh, yes, we didn't include that.
It was 3%.
3%. So if you just, at the end of the year two, then I'll just go take the full stop, with indexation in the outer years at 3%. Yep, that's it, 3%. Okay, we've got there as presented. Councillors, final bite of the cherry before we go, and if not, no further discussion, I'll now move that motion. Do we have a seconder for such? Anyone want to second that at this stage? Councillor Jones has seconded it. Thanks, Councillor Jones. Anyone wish to speak for or against? Any further debate? Those in, well, Councillor Shoemaker. Yep.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just wanted to confirm the dollar amounts that we're proposing here for the chamber. Is that possible?
Yeah, so just while Selena's doing that, currently the first pedestal is at $739 and the second pedestal is at $207. So if we were to increase, which is 28%, if we were to increase the second pedestal from 28% for hospitals and education up to 54%, then the $207, Selena, would become?
Let's go with 399.
399, so an increase of $192. Have I got that right, Selena?
It's 54% of your first pedestal charge, so that's why it's going. That's why it's $399, because it's 54% of your $739 first pedestal charge, because you're moving the second pedestal closer to your first pedestal.
So what we're doing is the 54% is 54% of your first pedestal. So that's in year one. If we turn our mind to the others, which is the commercials and the flats, they go from 28% of first pedestal, where we are now, to 34% of first pedestal, which would be, Selena?
251.25.
251. So they would go from 207 to 251, which is an extra $44. 207 to 251. Yeah.
And there's no change to the first pedestal at all, is there?
Correct.
Did you want the Proston rural numbers as well, because they're rated separately? They are, but they're just because their first pedestal charges are different to the 739. They're a different dollar value. So sorry, because they're a different scheme. So
Yeah, they have a CDP or something. CPD. They have a different series system. Yeah.
$235.50. 235.50. 50. Yep. And for the flats and commercial, the additional pedestals would go to 148 from the 136. And then you didn't want to worry about years, the second year, or do you want the numbers for the second year, or just year one?
Want to see this? We might just let the council digest the first year first. So in year one, we're saying first pedestal stays at 739. Second pedestals for hospitals and educational facilities would go from 207 to 399. And for commercial and flats, 207 to 251.
So just a question, Mr. Mayor. So the additional pedestal charge, I'm just looking back on some of my notes here and just want to confirm. So for some units and commercial entities, they haven't been charged a second pedestal charge to date, or they all people impacted?
No. So I think, so there's some that have been charged, like some of the flats are charged all first pedestals, which is where we were heading to. On our first lot, we were going to reclassify everything to first pedestals. Then we're looking at now moving a second pedestal closer to the first pedestal, which means all those flats that are charged all first pedestal will actually now have a reduction in their bill because they will now get reclassified as one first pedestal and then additional pedestal. So they'll receive a reduction and bring it back in line with where the others are.
And then the others who are only paying for one pedestal and haven't paid for an additional pedestal at all will now pay an additional pedestal charge.
No,
That's not correct, no.
No, I just want to be clear.
No, so at the moment, those with two pedestals, so a residence, King Town, two pedestals, you only pay for the first pedestal. That's correct. That's the front office. We don't charge for the second pedestal. Yep. For flats at the moment, it's 739 for the first, 207 for all the others, except if you're in the Nango, where they've been charged 739 for each and every one. So those will come down, and then everyone will be consistent. Yep.
And then units will all be the same. So any sort of commercial, any sort of duplex or dual purpose living will have the same methodology applied to it.
That's my understanding, I think, isn't it, Finance Manager? Yeah. Well, Councillor Duff.
So that my calculation says that the hospitals and the schools will go up by $192 per second. Every second pedestal will be up an additional $192, and then the flats will be an additional $44. Yep.
The year one increase.
That's yep. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Judge, you go. Yeah.
Just so when you put it in layman's terms like that, right? Flats $44 a year, not even $1 a week. That will be passed on to your people that are permanent residents in units and that sort of stuff. So just, I know that's not the way people will see it, but it's $44 a year per pedestal extra. 52 weeks, $44 a year.
Okay. Are we ready to go to the vote on this? Yeah, or do we want more information? We're in the debate stage. Okay. Well, let's put this to the vote. We have it in front of us there. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, committee. Now, we have got one more item on the agenda, but I'd like to ask Mr. CEO if we could please defer that out to the next meeting. I think the day is getting on. Our staff have stayed back. Thank you. My sincere apologies to our community's people. Before I close, can I just say, look, we've had some really healthy debate here today, and I think it's been a wonderful demonstration of democracy. Councillor Shoemaker managed to turn my mind. So well done, Council. A good team effort. Committee, and we'll now close the meeting. Thanks, everyone.